May 29, 1943, RAF Alconbury, England. 7 YB-40. Flying Fortresses from the 92nd Bomb Group's 327th Squadron were on the airfield. Their crews were finishing final checks for their first combat mission. These experimental planes, loaded with up to 16 50-caliber machine guns, were the Army Air Force's desperate answer to a major problem: the lack of fighter escorts, which was causing huge losses for the 8th Air Force over Germany. But instead of fixing the problem, these planes showed a deadly flaw in the B-17's basic design, a flaw that had been killing American airmen since they first started bombing occupied Europe. The issue was simple, but extremely dangerous. Two waist gunners stood directly across from each other in the B-17's narrow body. They operated flexible, 50-caliber machine guns through open windows on each side of the plane. Imagine the chaos of a fight at 25,000 feet, temperatures plunging to 60 F, 51 C, men wearing huge, bulky suits, 30-pound, 13.6-kilo flak armor, and parachute harnesses. While trying to shoot down German fighters attacking from the side, the gunners kept crashing into each other. This mess caused oxygen lines to break, leading to hypoxia and death within minutes. Ammunition belts got tangled, jamming the guns at the worst times. Airmen were dying not from enemy fire, but because the aircraft's design was fundamentally wrong, stopping them from defending themselves. The essential fix. What happened over the next 18 months led to one of the most vital design changes in military aviation history. Through painful combat lessons, careful study of losses, and quick changes in manufacturing, the B-17 went from an easy target to the most heavily defended bomber of World War II. The key fix was the revolutionary staggering of the waist gun positions. This change would save thousands of American lives and was crucial in getting air superiority over Nazi Germany. In early 1943, the numbers were terrifying. The average B-17 lasted for only 11 combat missions before being destroyed. Since crews needed to complete 25 missions, the chance of surviving a full tour was only 27%. This high death rate meant empty beds in the barracks, personal belongings being shipped back to grieving families, and new, untrained crews arriving faster than they could be ready for combat. The crisis had been building since the 8th Air Force started operations in August 1942. The flaw exposed. Before the war, the military thought that a formation of bombers, all firing together, could defend itself without fighter escorts, the self-defending bomber doctrine. This theory, never tested in large-scale combat, turned out to be tragically wrong. German fighter pilots, especially those flying the Focke-Wulf 190 and Messerschmitt Bf 109, quickly developed tactics to attack every weakness in the Flying Fortress's defense. The waist gun positions were the most obvious weak spot. Designed in the late 1930s and only tested in peacetime, these positions had never faced the brutal, sustained combat of the German skies. The B-17E and F models had two waist gunners operating flexible. Extreme conditions. The conditions at high altitude made the design problems much worse. At 25,000 feet, the standard bombing height, temperatures regularly hit 60 F, 200 mph, 322 km/h, winds screamed through the open windows, causing immediate frostbite on any exposed skin. Ice built up on the guns, oxygen gear, and ammo belts. Gunners wore multiple layers of gloves, including electrically heated mittens, but they still suffered frostbite when they had to take them off to clear a jammed gun with their bare hands. Reports from early 1943 showed the crisis growing. During the January 27th raid on Wilhelmshaven, gunners reported that they couldn't shoot effectively because they were getting in each other's way. On March 6th, during the attack on the Schweinfurt ball-bearing works, multiple B-17s couldn't defend against side attacks because the waist gunners were tangled up during the plane's sharp, evasive moves. The YB-40 fails. The YB-40 program started in September 1942 as a temporary fix for the escort problem. Since long-range fighters like the P-51 Mustang were not ready yet, bomber formations had no protection once the short-range P-47 Thunderbolt escorts had to turn back at the German border. Lockheed's Vega company was hired to turn standard B-17Fs into YB-40 gunships. The changes were massive. A second Sperry dorsal turret was installed in the radio area. Twin gun mounts replaced the single waist guns. A Bendix chin turret was added under the nose. The bomb bay was turned into an ammo storage area holding 11,000 rounds. Extra armor plating protected the crew. The first 13 YB-40s arrived in May 1943. Training immediately showed problems with the improved waist positions. Even though the firepower was doubled, the twin gun setup actually made the lack of space worse. During practice, gunners repeatedly hit each other and messed up their equipment. The first combat mission on May 29, 1943, targeting submarine bases in Saint-Nazaire, France, was a failure. The 7 YB-40s struggled to stay with the other bombers after they dropped their bombs. But the biggest issue was the severe problems with crew coordination in the waist. Post-mission reports confirmed that the waist gunners were unable to properly engage German fighters attacking from the side. The tragedy continued on June 22, 1943, during a raid on a synthetic rubber plant in Hulls, Germany. A YB-40 was destroyed after its waist gunners were completely ineffective due to getting in each other's way. The simple solution. An investigation found that this was not a single event, but a system-wide failure. Reports reached multiple commands. Teams at Wright Field, Boeing, and Douglas Aircraft began looking for answers. The United Airlines Modification Center in Cheyenne, Wyoming, which was set up specifically to implement combat improvements, started systematically testing solutions. The final answer was brilliantly simple: stagger the waist gun windows. By moving the left window forward and the right window back by about 3 feet, 0.9 meters, each gunner got his own clear operating space. They could track targets without hitting each other and feed ammunition without interference. This fix needed only minor changes to the plane's structure, but it promised a huge jump in combat effectiveness. The Cheyenne fix, the first B-17 with experimental staggered waist windows, was tested in combat in early July 1943. The results were instant and amazing. Gunners reported a massive improvement in their ability to track and shoot targets. Collisions and equipment problems dropped to almost zero, but staggering alone wasn't everything. Gunners were still exposed to the deadly cold and wind through the open windows. The complete solution combined the staggered positions with enclosed windows that had plexiglass panels and rotating gun mounts. This became known as the Cheyenne configuration, which finally made the waist positions functional combat stations. Douglas Aircraft first added the staggered window modification to late production B-17F planes in August 1943. Boeing immediately added the change to their new B-17G model, with the first one finished on August 30th. Lockheed Vega quickly followed. The B-17G was much more than just improved waist positions. It included every lesson learned from the bloody air battles of 1943. The Bendix chin turret gave vital defense against frontal attacks. The tail position was also redesigned with larger windows and better firing angles. Together, these changes turned the Flying Fortress into the most heavily armed bomber of the war. Production numbers show how urgent this was. Boeing's Seattle plant would go on to produce 8,680 B-17Gs. Production and impact. Douglas at Long Beach built 2,395 B-17s, and Lockheed Vega made 2,250. Every single one of these planes had the staggered waist window design, along with all the other combat-driven improvements. Combat reports from autumn 1943 showed how effective the changes were. During the October 8th attack on Bremen, the B-17G models, with the modified waist positions, shot down significantly more fighters than the older B-17F models that were still flying. Crucially, they had fewer losses from side attacks, exactly what the modifications were meant to prevent. October 14, 1943, Black Thursday, was a terrible day where 60 B-17s were lost. But even in this deadliest air battle, the analysis showed that the newer B-17G models suffered proportionally lower losses than the older F models. The defensive improvements were clearly paying off. The German reaction. German Air Force, Luftwaffe, reports confirmed that the American changes were making a difference. Major Hans Philipp noted in October 1943 that American bombers had become noticeably more difficult to attack. The waist guns were now firing accurately and consistently because the gunners could track fighters smoothly throughout their approach. The Germans had to change their tactics. They developed the Werfer Granit 21 rocket for attacks from a distance and created heavily armored Sturmbach assault fighters specifically to attack B-17 formations. The fact that they needed specialized weapons proved how effective the American modifications had become. Strategic shift. By December 1943, the transformation started changing war strategy. The 8th Air Force could plan deeper missions because they knew their bombers had much better survival rates. General Ira Eaker reported that the modifications had significantly improved their ability to carry out strategic operations. The impact went beyond just the planes. Training programs for gunners were changed for the new positions. Instructors noted that the staggered positions meant gunners could actually use correct deflection shooting techniques effectively. These fixes also influenced other aircraft. The B-24 Liberator used similar staggered waist positions in its later models. The B-29 Superfortress, still being developed, benefited by using remotely controlled turrets, which completely removed the crew from the exposed elements. The tide turns January 11, 1944, showed the combined effect of all the changes. 600 B-17s attacked German aircraft factories. Despite incomplete fighter protection, the losses were manageable, and most of them were the older F models. The G models showed remarkable survival ability. The Big Week operations in February confirmed the strategy was working. Over 3,000 bomber flights hit German aircraft production. Despite strong resistance from the Luftwaffe, losses were sustainable. The improved defenses had decisively shifted the balance of attrition. Lieutenant General James Doolittle realized that the modified B-17Gs could defend themselves better. He allowed the escort fighters to aggressively hunt German fighters instead of staying close to the formations. This combination was devastating for the Luftwaffe. March 4, 1944, was the first American daylight raid on Berlin. The 95th Bomb Group, flying B-17Gs, lost only 3 aircraft while claiming 17 German fighters destroyed, despite facing 200 enemy planes. By spring 1944, the 8th Air Force could maintain sustained operations. The ability to launch 1,000-bomber raids with acceptable losses meant they could systematically destroy German industry. The famous oil and transportation plans became possible because the bombers could survive the required missions. The D-Day operations were a clear demonstration of the change. The 8th Air Force flew over 2,000 bomber flights to support the invasion, yet only 26 bombers were lost from all causes. The B-17G had become a highly reliable weapon. Survival and legacy. By summer 1944, the Luftwaffe faced an impossible situation. American bombers were harder to destroy, and new aircraft were replacing losses immediately. The modifications had created a cycle. Better defenses meant more bombers survived, which meant Germany needed more fighters to attack, which resulted in more German losses. The most important human change was in tour completion statistics. In early 1943, finishing 25 missions seemed impossible. By mid-1944, crews were routinely completing 35 mission tours. The probability of survival had more than doubled. The transformation was confirmed in August 1944, when German intelligence examined a crashed B-17G. They noted that the offset waist positions provided effective side defense. The accumulated modifications had turned the aircraft from a vulnerable target into a formidable opponent. Production continued tirelessly. Boeing was producing 16 B-17Gs daily at its peak. The ability to quickly implement combat improvements created a weapon system that evolved faster than the enemy could adapt. Final missions. October 1944 brought another major moment when B-17Gs successfully fought German jet fighters. Despite the Me-262's speed, waist gunners damaged several jets, proving that the improved conventional defenses were still effective against revolutionary technology. The Christmas Eve mission of December 24, 1944, was the largest airstrike of the war, with 2,034 bombers. Despite the massive scale, the proportional losses were lower than those of the small raids in early 1943. On February 3, 1945, nearly 1,000 B-17s flew over Berlin. Only 21 bombers were lost. What would have been a catastrophe in 1943 was now considered an acceptable loss rate. The last B-17G rolled off the production line on April 13, 1945. The final bombing mission was on April 25, 1945. B-17Gs attacked Czech arms factories without any losses. The modifications had worked. Post-war analysis confirmed that the B-17's evolution, especially the improvements to defensive positions, was vital in achieving air superiority. Financial records showed the value of the modifications. $20 million spent on changes prevented the loss of 800 aircraft, worth $190 million, plus the invaluable loss of trained crews. The return on investment was over 10-to-1. The technical legacy continues today. Every military aircraft since has incorporated lessons from the B-17 modifications. Crew workspace, protection from the environment, and clear fields of fire are now basic principles of aviation engineering. Veterans consistently stressed the importance of the change, saying the simple offset windows were the difference between life and death. General Carl Spaatz said it best. The B-17G was designed not in factories but in combat. Every improvement came from the crews who found the weaknesses through terrible experience. The staggered waist windows and other changes turned a flawed bomber into a war-winning weapon. This transformation shows America's ability to quickly adapt based on battlefield feedback. While Germany made technically superior individual planes, they couldn't match America's speed in identifying problems, developing solutions, and implementing those changes across thousands of production aircraft within months. The offset waist windows saved countless lives and helped secure victory.